Now, I'm not one to gossip, but I will bring you the tea. Welcome to Chronicle Speaks.
Please, I don't have any time for any gossip now. Eh? Yes.
Look at you.
It's a known fact that Wendy has been going through it lately. The stories just don't stop coming in. One side that we haven't heard from is the side of her production company, Debmar Mercury. Debmar Mercury has been quiet, hearing ridicule from Wendy's fans, myself included, but you know it's always three sides to every story. In this particular case, there's Wendy's side, Debmar Mercury's side, and the truth. Well, Ira Bernstein and Mort Marcus had a sit down and told their side of how Wendy's show took a toll for the worst, and it seems like alcohol definitely was to blame. Baby, this rabbit hole goes so deep a sister got lost. We're going to get into that and so much more, but before we do, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any of this tea. Now let's get back into it. So the Hollywood Reporter had a sit down with the two guys responsible for getting Wendy on television, and that's Mort Marcus and Ira Bernstein. And let me start off by just saying that the illustration they had on the top of the two movers moving Wendy's legendary purple chair showed me that this interview was possibly shady. I read half of it and I said I want to finish it with my folks. Y'all want to hear it? Here it goes. Inside of the final days of the Wendy Williams show. For 12 years, she was one of daytime's most bold and beloved personalities. Then she was gone, replaced by a string of guest hosts amid tabloid rumors. Now, a behind-the-scenes look at what really went down with TV queen of the Purple Throne. On the morning of September 30th, 2021, two television executives made their way to Wendy Williams' apartment in downtown Manhattan. As the longtime producers of The Wendy Williams Show, Debmar Mercury co-presidents Mort Marcus and Ira Bernstein were trying to assuage their fears of the talk show's 100-person staff, who they knew were reading about Wendy Williams' health struggles in the press. Already, the promotional tour that she had scheduled for the 13th season had been scuttled, and the official September 20th start date was pushed back. The plan was to have Williams piped in via Zoom to the show's studio in New York City's Chelsea's neighborhood. Because the staff had questions, says her then manager Bernie Young, whose job had morphed into liaising Williams' tests and doctor's visits. So the idea was, look, they hadn't seen you or spoken to you, so let's do this for the staff and let everybody know where things are. The 58-year-old host, whose catchphrase was, "How you doing?" became a rallying cry for daytime gossip hounds, appeared to be in good spirits when Young arrived at her apartment around 8 o'clock a.m. The two had rehearsed what she would say a handful of times, and Young, who worked closely with Rosie O'Donnell and Martha Stewart before Wendy Williams, was feeling good about what was going to transpire. At 10 o'clock a.m., some 50 staffers, many of whom had worked at the Wendy Williams Show for over a decade, were asked to congregate in the studio, with several more logging in from home. What happened next did not go as planned. Williams, who had riffed live on TV for 12 years and before that on the radio, did not seem herself, according to multiple people present, much less able to communicate a clear message, as her speech quickly became muddled and disconnected. She gets on and she starts rambling about, "I'm really fine, I'm going to be fine," and it's like, what are you saying? Recounts one bewildered insider who suggests she was starting not to be coherent. Aware that their plan was backfiring, the executives thanked everyone for their time and ended the Zoom abruptly. It lasted 2.5-3 minutes, and it was not pretty, says Lonnie Bernstein, Debmar Mercury's executive VP programming, who had been seated in the studio with the show's staff. People were sort of freaked out. She was saying things like, "Oh, I can't wait, I'll be back with you really soon." But it was obvious to anyone watching that she was not going to be back really soon. Instead, a revolving door of guest hosts filled in for the remainder of the year. By February, with Williams effectively AWOL, Debmar Mercury decided it had no choice but to announce that the 13th season of The Wendy Williams Show would be its last. Williams first sparked fears for her health in 2017 when she fainted live on air during the Halloween episode of The Wendy Williams Show. After an emergency commercial break, she regained consciousness and told her fiercely loyal audience of Wendy watchers that she overheated in the Statue of Liberty costume, but it proved not to be an isolated incident. In fact, her struggles seemed to snowball from there. Over the next 4 years, the woman who rose to fame, dishing the unvarnished truth about others, had become her own hottest topic. Nothing, it seemed, was off limits, which only endeared her to her audience. From her famous purple chair, Williams spoke openly and unapologetically about her ongoing struggles with substance abuse, revealing through tears in 2019 that she'd been staying in a sober living facility. Before that, the host had done time at a high-end rehab in Florida, which, according to Marcus and Bernstein, was paid for by Debmar Mercury. Williams also discussed on the show the demise of her marriage of 20-plus years to Kelvin Hunter and the baby he was having with his mistress, and later revisited both in her sanctioned Lifetime documentary, Wendy Williams, What a Mess. Hunter, who had been Williams' manager and producer on the show, was fired from the latter in April of 2019, a week after the host filed for divorce. Earlier this year, he filed a wrongful termination suit against Debmar Mercury, who declined to comment on the pending litigation. Behind the scenes, insiders say Williams was unraveling. Everybody on the staff and crew witnessed all kinds of things, says one show source. According to two more, during that 4-year period, producers sent pre-show text messages to higher-ups at the company questioning Williams' sobriety on at least 25 separate occasions. Those at the top would then have to make an ultra-quick judgment call on whether to go live at 10 a.m., which those sources say was typically complicated by the fact that Williams would insist she was fine. In some of those instances, the episode in question was the second taping of the day, which meant it wouldn't air until later in the week, giving the execs time to rewatch the hour to see if Williams appeared inebriated. In all but one case, it was decided that she seemed fine enough, and the episode aired as planned. The exception occurred in the spring of 2021, and a repeat ran in its place. One of those sources adds that the staffers would find bottles of alcohol up in the ceiling tiles and other weird places in the office. Oh my God. Williams declined to comment directly for this piece, but spokesman Sean Zanotti noted in an email, it has been no secret that Wendy has battled with addiction over the years, but at this time, Wendy is on the road to recovery and healing herself from her chronic illness and her grievances of the past. Asked about incidents involving her physical and mental health, Zanotti declined to comment on specifics, writing, "What we do know is that Wendy has a history of chronic illness that she has publicly spoken about." By the summer of 2021, Williams was in and out of the hospital and doctor's care, according to multiple sources who were not comfortable discussing her health publicly. Many initially assumed substance abuse was solely to blame, but per those same sources, it became clear that there were other health issues to play. Soon, Williams, who had been open about her battle with Graves' disease and lymphedema, was being whisked from one expert to the next as medical professionals tried to figure out what was causing symptoms like nonlinear speech, brain fog, memory loss, and even hallucinations. To this day, we don't know what the issue truly is, says Bernstein. Young, who replaced Hunter as Wendy's manager back in 2019, remained optimistic. Part of it, he acknowledges, is his general outlook, and with Marcus and Bernstein's help, he had her in front of the top doctors in Manhattan. If they could figure out just what was wrong, they could help her get back on track. Plus, he says she got sick the year before. She was very sick one day, and the next day she was 300% better. So while they're searching for answers, I'm saying that could happen. The show, the staff was focused on launching season 13. A promo shoot was scheduled for September 2nd, which would focus on the number 13. It's such a random, scary number for a lot of people, so we had an idea of an elevator with the 13th floor, and it opens up to a stage, and it's like, oh, it's okay, says Debmar Mercury's senior VP, Adam Lewis. An elevator was constructed at a nearby studio, and Williams would be seen riding up to floor 13. The night before, word came via Young that she wouldn't be well enough to make it. Williams was back in the hospital. With the set already built, Lewis and the team revised the plan, sticking Williams' iconic purple chair in the elevator instead. A week later, the host bailed on her promotional appearances too. A statement was posted on the show's social feeds. Williams was dealing with some ongoing health issues and would need to undergo further evaluation. I think we thought, shoot, this is a little unexpected and we're going to have to pivot, recalled Debmar Mercury's executive VP programming, Alexandra Druitt, but I don't even think at that point we thought the show wasn't going to launch September 20th. Then things went from bad to worse. Photos of Williams walking the city streets in blue hospital booties began flooding the internet. A few days later, reports of her being hospitalized for a psychiatric evaluation followed. It had become clear internally that they would need to push the season premiere by a couple of weeks, but Lewis and the show's PR team were still trying to figure out what exactly they'd say. Then Williams came down with COVID-19. It was one of those moments where it was like, oh no, she's got COVID, but at least there's something instead of, we don't know what to tell you, he says. We were like, we're doing quarantine for 2 weeks, and that gave us a little bit of breathing room. On September 30th, an hour before the ill-fated staff Zoom, the show's social channels announced yet another 2-week delay, noting that Williams was under a doctor's care. The stations had been pretty patient up until then. Now a new plan was needed. They started calling saying, guys, if you don't put out a new episode, we're going to pull it. So what can we do? We started saying, let's just do a couple of weeks of guest hosts until she's better, says Marcus and Bernstein added. For the first 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks, we think, we're putting a Band-Aid on it and Wendy's coming back. Producing the Wendy Williams show without Williams was never going to be easy, in part because Williams had established such a fervent fan base over 12 seasons, an eternity in syndicated television. She's been described as either morning TV's resident gal pal or its bomb thrower, and both her ratings and her salary, about $6 million a year, reflected her prowess. She famously tussled with plenty of stars, from Whitney Houston to Lil' Kim, and in her shock jock days, outed others as gay, all under the headline, "That's Wendy just telling it like it is." Last week's Tonight's John Oliver once praised Williams as an oasis of truth in a world full of lies. Okay, so the next part talks about the guest host, and honestly, that was just as boring as watching it. So we're going to jump to this part. All the while, producers waited on word from her, which came from Young, who was by Wendy's side until Thanksgiving. Right around that time, the host took off for Florida to be closer to her family, including her college-age son, Kevin Hunter Jr., her brother, her sister, and even her ex, who declined to comment for this story. Things got really fuzzy at that point, says Young. Her family wanted to take over and do things that they wanted to do for her and with her, and it's like, all right, okay, look, I don't agree. Look at the progress. Any communication Young had with Williams ended shortly after. Marcus and Bernstein were no longer able to reach her either. Williams' cell phone would simply ring and ring. They say, in fact, it wasn't clear she still had a phone at all. Back in New York, the Wendy Williams show went on without her. But as Thanksgiving turned to Christmas, the stations were feeling pressure to finalize their fall 2022 lineups, which are done a year in advance in syndication. As much as they, like Debmar Mercury, were eager for Williams to return, renewing the Maybe Wendy Williams show was not an option. At a certain point, you can't really play what if, says Frank Seicha, Executive VP Programming for the Fox TV stations. You do have to have an answer. So on February 22nd, 2022, Debmar Mercury made its plan official. The Wendy Williams show would end with its 13th season that spring, and a new show from Shepard would launch in its time slot in the fall. The announcement paid homage to Williams, whom it called a true icon, and praised her successor, Shepard, as a natural. Shepard declined to speak for this story. Okay, boring. We're going to get to the next part. Marcus and Bernstein didn't know when or if they'd hear from Williams again. Then one day in late February, or maybe it was early March, Bernstein's phone rang. What was all of this about her show being canceled? Williams wondered. I said, we haven't heard from you, and we had to make a decision. We should have made one in November, but we pushed it to January or February, and by then it was like, make a decision or lose the time period, recounts Bernstein. She said, well, what's going to air at 10 o'clock? I told her Sherry's going to air at 10 o'clock. She said, so can I go on at 11? I said, we'd love to work with you, and there's a lot of ways and a lot of buyers, but you need to come back, and we need to know that you're okay. You can't just call after 9 months and say, I'm ready. A version of this conversation would take place several more times over the next 4 months. There were multiple phone calls, sometimes with Bernstein, sometimes with Marcus, and a sit-down lunch in Manhattan. Each time, according to the pair, Williams appeared to be having the discussion for the first time. Wow, just wow. Marcus fielded her next call, and as Bernstein had stressed the importance of Williams getting cleared by a doctor before she'd be able to return to TV in any meaningful capacity, we said, Wendy, we need to have a diagnosis from a doctor, whether it's the TV stations or a network or a new producer. Anyone who's going to do business with you after you didn't show up for a year needs to know that you're okay. Without that assurance, no one's going to risk the money or finance things, says Marcus. To date, Williams has either been unable or unwilling to present one, though Bernstein suspects it's the former. Unfortunately for Wendy, the happiest moments in her life were on TV. She said to me once at a Christmas party, you know when I'm the happiest? 10 a.m. Monday to Friday. And she was great at it, he says. There are probably 6 or 8 people in the world who can do it, and she's one of them. And I believe that if there was a piece of paper that said no problem, she's all good, she wouldn't hesitate to show all it. The while, the team around Williams kept changing. At one point, Williams enlisted LaShawn Thomas, an attorney with close ties to her ex, leaving many to speculate about the latter's role. Thomas, who identifies as Hunter's lawyer for entertainment industry-related matters, tells The Hollywood Reporter that she was brought on by Williams to help in her legal fight with Wells Fargo, which had frozen her accounts earlier this year. Before the case was sealed, the bank claimed that Williams was an incapacitated person and the victim of undue influence and financial exploitation. By May, a New York judge had appointed a guardian over her finances, an arrangement that would continue until at least July. According to Thomas and others, Williams' financial guardianship has since been extended, though she was prohibited by the judge overseeing the matter from representing Williams because of a conflict of interest. I didn't know about that. Young says he read in the tabloids that he'd been fired. To this day, he insists that nobody has actually said as much to him. I saw that and said, okay, look, there's a lot of things to clean up. I think I'm a good person and a good businessman, and I'll take care of business that I need to take care of until it's not there to take care of. Which is what I'm doing, he says. If there are loose ends, if there are questions, I do that. It's not a problem. When I say I'm in, I'm in. But if I'm out, look me in my eye and tell me I'm out. Williams' camp maintains that Young was indeed fired. By March, Williams had taken to Instagram to accuse Young of charging $10,000 to her American Express account without her consent to hire an attorney to file a petition against her. Young confirms he spent the money to hire Abrams, Finsterman, Carolyn Wolf, a leading mental health lawyer whose official bio says she specializes in guiding families through the complex landscape of legal issues that impact loved ones with serious mental illness and or substance use issues. His goal, he tells The Hollywood Reporter, was to protect Williams. As for the report that he'd file a petition seeking to appoint Williams' guardian, Young says, I would not file to be guardian, and I did not file to be guardian. Those are the facts. In the interim, the role of Wendy's manager had been filled by William Selby, a high-end jeweler who says he met the host through a DJ 5 or 6 years ago. As Selby tells it, he had helped her procure some diamonds, and the two remained tight. When he started to see others in the purple chair this past season, he stepped in. Wendy's a pretty strong woman. She's positive and optimistic, so in her head, she's thinking she's going to get better and everything's going to get back to normal. And I was just looking at it from a business standpoint and saying, hey, it doesn't look too good. So let's start thinking about some other options. It's like a basketball player after the NBA. What are you going to do? You got to think about it. The pair have been busy with a few projects, including a restaurant and a podcast titled The Wendy Experience. Per Selby, there will be audio and visual components to the latter, and ideally, William will have friends like Fat Joe, Andy Cohen, and Dr. Oz on as a guest. Go on to talk about the bizarre interview she had with Fat Joe, as well as the one she had with TMZ. And he said, look, I can't muzzle her. He said she's an adult. I can't lock her up in the house and say, don't move. Don't even look out the window. This isn't prison, Selby says, urging fans to have patience with Williams, even as photos of her asleep in the Louis Vuitton store or doling out worrisome interviews out of a car window whip around the internet. In going through so many things, she's going to have off moments. Doesn't mean she's about to die. Doesn't mean she's going crazy. It just means she's not feeling well today. Selby continues insisting that he genuinely cares about Williams, even if others seem to doubt him. I know everyone thinks that we're all trying to take advantage of her. And what I don't understand is, don't I look rich? Why would I come into Wendy's life to take advantage of her? I don't have time for that, he says. So no one's trying to make her do anything that she doesn't want to do. She wants to work right now. I'm the one saying, hey, Wendy, let's wait, let's assess. And if you really feel 100% ready, then let's do it. As the series finale of the Wendy Williams show approached in June, the team at Debmar Mercury began having meeting after meeting about how they'd bid farewell. There wasn't exactly a handbook for such a thing. We knew we didn't really want it to feel like an in memoriam because she's very much alive, says Lewis. At the same time, we weren't really going to do a huge countdown with celebratory balloons because it didn't really feel celebratory. One of the many ideas proposed was simply to air the final episode without any acknowledgement that it was the last one. Ultimately, the group decided the best way to honor Williams and her legacy was with a feel-good highlight reel from her 12-season tenure, which Shepard would introduce mid-show. When the 7-minute tape was first screened for the executive team, there were very few dry eyes. What was never seriously considered, however, was bringing Williams back for the final show. To put her on as a guest or to do a video message from her would be a disservice to Wendy, who is so much bigger than that, says one producer. who would only speak on the condition of anonymity. Plus, the executives agreed that she was not in the position to appear on TV. Even the stations, which knew they'd pop a big rating with Williams back in her chair, didn't push. Williams and her ex have since blasted the choice in the press, with the former suggesting the finale was ick and the latter calling her absence a travesty. The team, get this, wanted to be sensitive to Shepherd too, and having Williams return to her own show, even just to say goodbye, would have been incredibly awkward, says Bernstein. It would have stolen the spotlight, and at this point, our chips are all on Sherry. Shepherd would soon be unfairly blamed for a series of moves outside her control, including Debmar Mercury's decision to remove the Wendy Williams Show YouTube channel and its social accounts, which Lewis attributes to a rights and clearance issue. That somehow Shepherd had stolen Williams' show or her social followers became narratives in certain corners of the internet as well. It honestly wouldn't have mattered who we chose, Marcus acknowledges, because it isn't actually about Sherry, except now she's taken the brunt and she shouldn't. The day before the final show, Williams is said to have caught a promo on Fox. She called me like, wait a minute, what do you mean it's canceled? What are you talking about, says Marcus, who would have to have the same heartbreaking conversation once more. Selby believes that his client didn't think the show was actually ending until that point. No matter how many people could have told her, you could have told her, I could have told her, she's thinking, I'll be ready in a week and I'm coming to shoot, he says. So it's kind of happening all of a sudden for her, even though it's unraveling before her eyes. At 10 a.m. on June 17th, Williams sat down in her downtown Manhattan apartment, watching the Wendy Williams Show air for the last time. Before the tribute reel rolled, Shepherd thanked the incredible staff, almost all of whom will be staying on for her show, along with Miss Wendy herself. There is nobody like Wendy Williams, crediting her predecessor with single-handedly changing daytime talk. Looking right into the camera, she added, "You are an icon and you are loved by many." Through thunderous applause, she repeated, "So many." Right then, the studio audience rose to its feet and began chanting, "Wendy, Wendy, Wendy." Once it was all over, the entire staff filled into the studio audience where a series of speeches and toasts began. Marcus and Bernstein both fought back tears as they reminded those gathered, many of whom had been there from the start, how special the Wendy Williams Show had been for them. Two, in part because it was the first original show that Debmar Mercury ever did. We practically bet our houses on it, says Bernstein, and we just wanted to thank everyone for hanging in there. Jewett also remembered most in the room crying that day. "I've been working in daytime for over 30 years, and lightning in a bottle like Wendy Williams doesn't come through very often," she says, fighting back tears in her retelling. "And I think I can speak for everyone in saying that we all feel so lucky to have been along for the ride." So yeah, the final show was really hard, and it was really hard to a large degree because Wendy wasn't there. Oh, now I got some mixed emotions about all of this. I still feel like they did Wendy wrong with ending it the way they ended it, but did they really have a choice with the way you hear Wendy has been acting and with everything happening with her money? Like, all of this kind of goes full circle. We've been seeing how she's been acting lately. I don't feel comfortable with Wendy being around anybody but her son. Who really has her best interests at heart? Like, I don't think anybody. This is crazy. I don't really know what's going on in the world of Wendy. All I can say is I pray for her. Alcohol, I think, is worse than drugs. Honestly, I really feel like that's that one thing that is just so hard to get over. If Wendy was putting liquor bottles in the tile of the ceiling, I haven't heard of that being done before. Wendy had it pretty bad. All I can say is I'm praying for her. I don't know what the next thing for Wendy will be, but I don't think it's podcasting. I don't think it should be restaurateur. I don't think it should be anything but get Wendy together for Wendy. Don't try to entertain anybody else. Let's get Wendy right for Wendy. I need you guys to comment. Tell me what you think about everything going on with Wendy. What do you think about everything I just read with what the producers are saying? Leave a comment and you know how we do. We'll talk about it down below. Talk to you guys later. Bye. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my new episodes.